Hi there, it's Kevin with Rogue Market here with a top 10 video of cards that I think are undervalued compared to their price for the Commander scene. So I've got MTG Goldfish pulled up right here, and this is in the modern slot, which is usually dominated by strictly modern cards. One thing I've liked about EDH/Commander is it never did hit this list. So these price spikes were kind of out of sight, out of mind for the vast majority of people that are in the more MTG finance scene. I've always said that the MTG finance people have been obsessed with the competitive scene because I think they're competitive players at heart as well. So most of them either came from Modern or Legacy because they saw the price of those formats go crazy, and that's how they have their investment practices. So EDH/Commander has always had that nice little a few cents here, a few cents there, and it slowly goes up, unaware of a lot of people, and then all of a sudden you have a card that's like $10 up to about $25. Well, this is changing very rapidly. We are seeing a huge boom in the Commander format. You can see here on the daily changes cards like Rise of the Dark Realms, which we called a week ago, the Sliver Legion, Blightsteel Colossus, Staff of Domination, Sakashima the Impostor. All of these are Commander cards. They're not competitive cards. They don't see play in Modern, and this just shows you what a runaway market we have for Commander. So for this video, I'm going to look at what I like to call the Magic 2.0. That's everything after Return to Ravnica. What I like to call that 2.0 is that's when they changed their policy on printing to demand. Booster boxes beforehand used to have basically a print life. So there's a set amount of time. It's usually like 18 months or 12 months that they'd print a set, or maybe they'd even just do in a few waves. And then if there wasn't enough demand in those first couple waves, they'd stop and it would go out of print. Now they print the sets to demand in Standard, and I think it even goes a little bit past the rotation in Standard that they'll still print to demand. I can't remember what set that they did another printing after it was rotated just to get a few more into the supply. However, there are rumors that they got rid of that because of dismal sales with sets like Hour of Devastation, and there's rumors that Dominaria is out of print and there is no plans on reprinting it. I'm going to talk to my distributors. I'm going to directly talk to Wizards to see if that is the case. If so, then we might need to change our investment practices for those particular sets if it is no longer print to demand. However, Magic 2.0 has been notorious for stubborn prices years after. Return to Ravnica is a good example of cards not being able to accrue any sort of value, even if they are in popular sets like Commander, because the supply is just so high on those particular sets. Well, if we come over here, though, we can actually see that that's not really the case anymore. We're seeing the Return to Ravnica and even all the way up to Concept Arcare actually starting to have decent value, where cards that have been bulked for so long now have a bit of equity to them, which is surprising. And that's all happened within the last little while. So if we take a look at something like Theros, is one that I pulled up earlier. Theros, there are cards here that were bulk forever. We're talking about these mythics like the Erebos and the Thassa. These cards were inexpensive mythics for a long time. Even cards like the Swan Song, which does see some legacy play, has now increased a ton in value since when I remember this card as being near bulk. And then if we even go down to cards like Curse of the Swine, this card actually has real world value. I used to bulk these cards like crazy as they saw very little Commander play overall and very little competitive play, but now you can see that over 11,000 decks have registered them, and now these actually have real world value. You can check out basically any of these type of sets and find out what I'm talking about. So for this video, I want to look at cards that I think have the potential of going up, that their price point is low compared to the amount of play they see in Commander. And if this Commander boom continues, we should see them have a nice little trajectory and start to gain some equity, start to gain a lot more value than they used to. So let's start off with my number 1 card, or my number 10 card. This one is out of Battle for Zendikar, and this is Emeria Shepherd. Emeria Shepherd is currently about 45 cents for the TC market price. The vendor price buy list is about 10 cents for this card, so there still is a lot of supply, but I don't think the Battle for Zendikar has any more supply than Theros or Return to Ravnica. I think they're all very similar in that height of Magic. The only thing that the Return Ravnica and Theros has going for them is over Battle for Zendikar is they're an older set than Battle for Zendikar. So within a year or two, we should start to see this card actually start to increase, very similar to other levels like the Curse of the Swine or the Swan Song, because the amount of play this sees is pretty good. So if we look at the Emeria Shepherd, you can see that it's in 8,738 decks. This number is not created equal. You have to compare this to a card out of the set. So 8,000 compared to Hedron Archive at 25,000. If we kind of go down at some similar cards, we can see that some other rares that see less play than the Mary Shepherd can actually be worth more. And it's actually, in the scope of things, sees more play like some of these other cards that are at this point considered pretty much Commander staples. So I think a 40-cent rare is a steal of a deal for a card. If you go back over to the price trajectory, it's flattened out. It had a bulk price at one point, but it looks like it, double up from its bulk price is a good sign for this card. It sees play in popular decks like Karametra and Kaalia. These are pretty much staple commanders, same thing with Avacyn. These are decks that new players are going to get into and build. Kaalia is a very, very popular deck, and it's one of the more powerful angels in Kaalia as it has the recursion value with the cheating in value. It's two things this deck wants to do with Kaalia is cheat in expensive angels and then be able to recur them if plan B, Kaalia doesn't work. So a Mary Shepherd is a card that I think you should be checking your bulk bins for. I wouldn't be making any sort of move on this card. It's whenever you see this card for like a quarter, that's the time to get in, and maybe check back a year or 2 years and this could actually have some value. In the scope of things, if a card goes from 50 cents to $2 in a year or 2 year time period, that's a pretty good return year to year. All right, so on to the next one. This is the Mending of Dominaria from Dominaria. This card sees a lot of play in Commander comparatively to the cards surrounding it and has a relatively bulk rare price. Card Kingdom starts everything at 25 cents. If a rare even remotely sells, they bump it up to 35 cents. So it is selling from Card Kingdom, but not at the rates that they would bump it up even higher. If we look at its EDH profile here, it sees play in 2,151, which doesn't seem like a lot when you compare it to Mary Shepherd, but again, you have to compare, you can't compare apples and oranges here. Dominaria is fairly recent, sees play in Muldrotha, which is key. Both if a card sees play in Muldrotha or Lord Windgrace, this is a card you absolutely should be putting on your spec list because both of these two commanders are starting to take off as far as popularity. We've seen basically any card out of Atraxa or Marin hold a lot more value because they're in those particular decks comparatively to other decks because of just how popular these decks are. They are tier 1 as far as the casual play is concerned. People love their Muldrotha, they love their Lord Windgrace. So if you come over here to Dominaria, you can see that the Mending of Dominaria is actually, it's fairly up there. So yes, there are cards like Helm of the Host that have 5,000, but that's kind of the cap of what Dominaria has at the moment. And Helm of the Host is one of the most heavily played cards in Commander from more recent sets. So 5,000 is a huge number, has about half of that with Mending of Dominaria. If you look at other cards surrounding it, some of the other rares, there are plenty of other rares that are worth more than the Mending of Dominaria, and I'm thinking of this card has only one way to go up, or only one way to go and is up, especially because it's in both the Lord of Windgrace and the Gitrog Monster, Omnoth, and the Muldrotha. So same strategy that I'd put for Maria. You target these for 10 cents, 25 cents, look at them for bulk bins. I wouldn't be paying the full price for 35 cents at this moment, but that could change if you start to see more movement in this card, like if Card Kingdom bumps it up to 50 cents or up to $1 and they're still going on TCG for 35 cents. That's the time I think you should make your move on the Mending of Dominaria. All right, on to the next one. This is Arch of Araska. This is from Rivals of Ixalan. This is a very versatile card as far as a land. A colorless land can go in anything. It's a draw outlet. It's very easy to get a send in Commander. I do believe prices might go down a little bit more towards rotation, but you can see that this card was seeing play in various Celestia decks in Standard, and those decks kind of got pushed out, and the price did go back down. So I'm thinking that this is Commander that is keeping it stable. So Card Kingdom has a $1.79. The buy list price of 50 cents means that they're reasonably, I mean, that's a decent spread for Card Kingdom, anything under $2. They pay way more, or way less than 50% for that card. So them having at least a 45% buy list is pretty aggressive for them on this particular card. If we look over here, it's in 2,421 decks, is played in Kozilek, which just got a huge deck tech by the command zone. And a lot of these more recent decks, you can see most of these commanders are more recent decks that have been throwing it in. So that's a good sign because it shows that the popularity card is actually there. People aren't really slotting it or putting it in decks that are older and re-uploading their decks just because they put Arch of Araska in. So it does have that popularity for the new decks, though. If we look over here for Rivals of Ixalan and compare this number, the Arch of Araska is the 7th most played card in the format. You have cards like Atali that even had a Walmart printing, so the Walmart promo packs that are still around the $4 mark. Wayward Swordtooth going up, and even World Shaper, and this card is going less than those ones right now, and I think it's more versatile. So the more commanders that come out, the more decks can slot the Arch of Araska, and it's just undervalued comparatively to the cards surrounding it. So this is another card, though, I don't think you need to be quite aggressive on. I'd look for deals for the Arch of Araska, 75 cents and below, but it is one that you definitely want to make sure to look for in your trades, look for in your buys as throw-ins and whatnot. On to the next one. This is basically the battle for Zendikar Lands in general. These are all undervalued in my opinion. Canopy Vista is the one that sees the second most play and has the lowest price point, I believe. And these are just a steal of a deal, as the trajectory is what I like the most about this. So they flatlined out around Iconic Masters, and they've gone up almost double since Iconic Masters. This is the perfect card I like to invest in because it has shown that it's up. This is the route it's going. Yes, these lands might be susceptible to be reprinted. I think that Wizards is going to forego that, though, and try to reprint other lands before they reprint these particular lands, because they don't see a very little play in Modern. I think the only one that sees play is a red-green one for Scapeshift, and there are better targets to get that equity out of for the land slots. If you check over here for the Battle for Zendikar, you can see that they are next to Hedron Archive, they're the most played cards in the set. So we've had some of the mythics go up. We have Hedron Archive continue to go up in value, even though it's had some reprints. These have not had reprints. Basically, in any deck that you can put one of these in Commander, you're going to put it in. They're just strictly better than the Guild Gates or the Gain Life tap lands, and they can actually be fetched up, which is huge because fetch lands do not have a color identity, yet they can actually go get these ones. So you can have one shock, you can have your original duels, you can have a few other duels, and you can fetch up these that can actually come into play untapped on turn 4 or turn 5 if you have the basic lands to actually support them. So I like these. I think the price point of all of them are very, very reasonable, with the $2 for the Prairie Swim and the Canopy Vista. Cinderglade's a little bit more because of Scapeshift, and same thing with Smoldering Marsh. Yeah, this one's just a duh. It's going to take a while, but they're going to continue to have that nice little trajectory. Another Battle for Zendikar. Battle for Zendikar, a lot of supply, but there's a lot of goodies in this set. This one is Green Warden of Marasa. If we go back over to the Battle for Zendikar, it almost sees as much play in Commander as Ulamog does. But look at the price of Ulamog. Yes, this is the double dipping effect. This is because Ulamog does see play in Modern decently. Usually it's not a 4 of in most of the decks, it's a 1 of or 2 of. But it also, that's also stretching supply away, whereas Green Warden of Marasa is really just Commander. But again, Mythic and Mythic, they're both Mythic. This has the Ulamog is a substantially higher price point than the Green Warden of Marasa. Therefore, I think this one is undervalued Mythic-wise. In fact, look at even Void Winnower, which is another card that is basically just Commander. So if we are comparing apples and apples, it's lower than Omnixilus. Yes, that did get a reprint. Lower than Void Winnower, lower than Ulamog, and sees more play than these two. If we go back even down to something like Drana, it is less expensive than Drana. So I think this is the undervalued Mythic out of Battle for Zendikar. It's very flexible. It's just a more expensive Eternal Witness that you can flicker, or when it dies, you can actually get the die effect to get something back as well. So incredibly good card in Green Ward of Marasa. 6 mana is very acceptable for a card like Eternal Witness. If we actually look at what decks it sees play in, this is seeing play in decks like Omnath, the Gitrog monster again, popular decks, a lot in Omnath, as it is an elemental to go with Omnath. But then after that, it's a fairly wide spread in many different decks, and that's a good sign for a card because it means it's powerful enough for not just one Trick Pony deck, but many, many decks. So let's go on to the next one. This is Clever Impersonator from Khans of Tarkir. You can start to see there is a bit of a spike here for Clever Impersonator, as it was $4 or $5 for a long time here. And now it is finally starting to get the increase that it probably deserves. The thing that's holding back Clever Impersonator is Khans of Tarkir. This set has probably the most supply out of any set, as this was opened up like crazy for the fetch lands, continue to get opened up, and now if there's any remaining supply of Concept here, it probably is going to be cracked for the fetch lands, as those just rose in value. So Clever Impersonator, the supply is probably done with it, hasn't seen a reprint in Commander sets. It probably will though, so keep that in mind. That's a risky spec there. This is the card, though, that I do think you do, if you want to invest in this card, need to be quite aggressive, because the buy list has been bumped up to $4 from Card Kingdom up to an $8. So that's, of course, going to bring the market price in the mid up from TCG Player. But if we compare this to other mythics from the set, from the Khans of Tarkir, you can see that it is the most played mythic out of the set, and not a lot of good commander cards from Khans of Tarkir that haven't been reprinted at the moment, but these cards do have the ability to go up in value, like Ultra Brood up to $4 is or $2.50 for a rare, and sees half as much play, excuse me, about a third as much play as the Clever Impersonator. So I think this card is going to be spiking up in value soon. All right, so on to another battle for Zendikar. I like this set a lot because of the price point of a lot of these cards. This is Smothering Abomination. This has had a little bit of an increase because of the Teysa decks, but this isn't just strictly a Teysa card. You can see that this card sees a fair amount of play, or a fair amount of play with comparatively to the rest of the cards in the set. It is currently sitting at... Now, I just saw here, this Mother Abomination, 6,379, so more than like something Oblivion Sower, on par with something like Draina, and it's starting to get a lot more popularity because it is run in the Teysa decks, and it is run in like Marin, and I actually think that this Mother Abomination is good enough for the Muldrotha as it continues to put things in your graveyard to recast again. So you never know when a deck like that will actually put it into its arsenal, but Marin decks love it, Teysa decks love it, the new Teysa deck loves it. Sacrifice seems to be a big theme for black decks, and if they do black-red this year, I think that'll be a theme for black-red. That seems to be a very, very huge theme for black-red, black-white, and this will be a go-to card for Commander from here on out. So I think that the amount of decks this is going to see play in gets better and better with the more sacrifice effects, which I think Teysa is assigned to come with the mechanic of things dying actually mattering. And, you know, maybe we'll have a thing that when things sacrifice have a bigger matter. And Smothering Abomination won't be bulk for long. Look at Card Kingdom. They've already increased their buy list of the Smothering Abomination. Doesn't look like it's here. Let's go ahead and check out Card Kingdom to see. Looks like Card Kingdom just went offline for TCG Player. But the buy list price for the Smothering Abomination, it's got it on foil. That's the problem. There's something wrong with EDHREC right now. Switch to non-foil. So they're not buying it right now. It's still 35 cents. Seems to have a lot of supply here. But still, I still think this is my call for a sleeper that is going to be included in more and more decks as time goes on. All right, so on to a card that I've pumped out a lot. I own a lot of copies myself with this, but I still continue to think this is one of the best, if not the best specs for the Commander format. This is Disallow. Disallow has gone up from the price that I suggested a couple weeks ago at $2.75. It is now about $3.50. Card Kingdom is still offering that $2.50 buy list for it. They still want over 200 of them, so that shows the faith that Card Kingdom has in the card. They must sell a bunch of these. They must go through their inventory quite quickly with it. And if we check it out over at EDHREC, it is the most played card in Aether Revolt by far. Rishkar's expertise is pretty close to it, but we have cards like Heroic Intervention that have a higher price tag than Disallow, yet Disallow sees more play. What I like the most about Disallow is the versatility. There's only a deck with 500, and this is Brawl. After Brawl, it's just a slew of decks that include basically any blue deck can throw Disallow in there because it's both a counterspell and a stifle effect, so it's never going to be dead. It's going to get you out of some tricky situations. Good for casual commander, good for competitive commander. Basically, it's justifiable to put in any blue deck. So a card that sees 15,000 decks this early, just from Aether Revolt, which isn't that long ago, could definitely go the way of Cyclonic Rift. Cyclonic Rift does see way more play, I admit, but this is one of those blue cards that sees a lot of play comparatively to other blue cards for the Commander format. So I think even at this point, it's still a pretty good bargain, getting it around the $3 mark, $3.50 mark, and below. On to the next one, which is criminally undervalued. This is Gyro Sanitarium. Gyro Sanitarium is incredibly versatile. Goes in a draw card deck, like Locust God goes in a discard deck, which there are plenty of them. It's a theme that they keep going back to in Commander. Looting effects are good. Any graveyard recursion based deck is going to want to loot. Any dredge based deck is want to do this. Yeah, it's tons and tons of decks are going to want to use the Gyro Sanitarium. It has even like some synergy with like things that scry on top of the library or let you go through things. So like the divining top, those type of things. So love the card for that reason. Is it's so versatile. Any deck you can justify throwing it in. And if you actually look over here, it sees playing 11,514 decks. Nekazar and Locust God are the clear winners, not the Gilt Leaf up there as well. But again, Duretti, that's a reanimation type strategy. Alesha, reanimation type strategy. Any of these decks, any deck can basically justify running this card in the deck to help smooth out draws. It does help your opponents too, but you're the one with the information actually using it. It's a very, very solid land. I like lands for the Commander format. I think they're very, very smart investments. If we go over here to Shadows or Innistrad, it is actually up there comparatively. Actually, it's not out of Shadows over Innistrad. It's out of, this one's out of, let's go back over. It's out of Eldritch Moon. Pulled up the wrong one here. Eldritch Moon, it is the most played card in Eldritch Moon. And if you compare prices, though, it is right around the mark of Thalia. Thalia did have a promo, though, so the price of Thalia should be lower, and it's much lower than like Eldritch Evolution or even Imprisoned in the Moon. And this is a very, very stable card in blue. A lot of these cards are pretty decent ones to invest in as well, but I think that this one by far is the one that's the most undervalued. It recently has gone up too. Like this card was I've called this, I believe, on a Rogue Roundup before, and this one should have really got into this card more than I did back here because I think it was a steal of a deal here and such a duh card that it was going to go up in value. Now for my best spec. This is out of the Challenger decks recently. This is Unclaimed Territory. This is your double dipper. This is your triple dipper. This is a card that sees a ton of play. Yes, there's a lot of supply out there because not only was it a league promo, it was also in the Challenger decks, but there have been cards like this that have seen as much supplies this card, they just go through the roof. And you can tell it hit its low. It stayed even stubbornly high after the Challenger decks. It has finally capped out at $1.50. I think this is the time to get in on Unclaimed Territory. I think it just sees an insane amount of play in Commander, any tribal-based deck. Modern still plays it. The check over here sees playing 5,849 decks. All the tribal decks wanting it. We go over to what that looks like out of the Ixalan. The only cards that are outproducing at the moment are Vanquisher's Banner and Growing Rights of Itlimic, and is the third most played card out of the set. So this had a lot of goodies like the Sunbird's Invocation, the Search for Azcanta, a lot of very staple cards that see a ton of play in the Commander format. And this one is just insanely versatile. It's a good utility card. You can just use it to cast your Commander. It's most Commander decks, if they have 3 colors, are going to want this, regardless if they're tribal or not, just because to help smooth out their Commander. And it's just a very, very solid card. So those are kind of my picks. I apologize for this being kind of a longer video. We'll have a more edited video for the Rogue Roundup. Maybe a couple of these cards will actually fit on this list. And these will be these sort of videos we'll do every so often just to get a gauge on the market and to see how things are. Hope you enjoyed this video. This is Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.